welcome to all of our viewers on CIG TV and those listening in. I also want to thank members of our press corps and senior civil servants who are here with us as well. This week, from our ministry, I just want to make three very, very brief announcements. One, we carried this morning, and I know Jay was here with us, and it's in regards to a new strategy that the ministry is taking the lead on, but it's a collaborative effort with the Ministry of Youth, the Ministry of Community Affairs, RCIPS, Her Majesty's Prison, and other agencies within government. It's called the Youth Act, which is an acronym that stands for Youth Anti-Crime Trust. Its first initiative is going to be a pilot in the John Gray High School and the Clifton Hunter High School on May 31st and June 21st respectively, and will include students from the sister islands. The day is going to basically involve students in year 8 having lesson plans delivered that will revolve around court, life, and life imprisonment, dangers of gangs, life of crime and drugs, sexual trauma, guns and gun crime, effects of drugs and alcohol, and other social responsibility. And that will focus on things like bullying, etc. Basically, this comes out of after us having a visit to Prison Me No Way in Jersey and the UK, and seeing how that program is run, but tailoring it for the needs of Cayman. And so those days are going to be our first crime awareness days in Cayman, and it's going to be a day where all of our students get really exposed and get to understand it. They're basically going to be confined, as it were, in their classrooms, and it's going to feel as though real life, what it feels like to be in prison. But they will be given those lesson plans that teach them and demonstrate to them real strategies about how not to wind up getting in trouble or wind up in prison at the end of the day during their lives. What this is going to also form a part of is an overall character education program that the ministry is currently working on. Character education is more than just these areas that we've mentioned. It's a much broader umbrella where in the school system we use our societal norms and values to actually have programs and classes tailored from primary school all the way through, instilling the values that we believe are very important for children to be instilled with. We recognize in our school system that we do have our children for a lot of hours during the day, and we want to ensure that we continue to meaningfully impact our children's lives. We clearly understand also that we need to incorporate parents as partners, because the home is the first school for children. Parents are the first teachers. And so we realize that how we engage and embrace parents as true partners in education is going to be one of the keys to success. And in fact, it is one of the pillars in the National Strategic Plan for Education. So I certainly am excited about the Memorandum of Understanding and the Memorandums of Agreements that have been signed between these agencies, which is real commitment. Every agency is signed up to this program because we know that it takes that collaborative approach if we're going to have the real impact that we want to have on our children's lives. Also, happy to report that a number of new policies are emanating from our ministry. One deals with the whole issue of certain categories of students in our schools who will, in the future, be exempted from having to pay school fees. As you will know, the Cayman Islands government started a program many years ago of bringing Caymanians and Caymanian descendants back from Cuba, in particular Isle of Pines. However, over the years, there have not been a lot of thought put around, or as much thought as could be put around, exactly what benefits we were going to give them as citizens. We exempted them from work permits, but for example, didn't bestow Caymanian status upon them. And so a number of them and their children don't have Caymanian status at present. And so we're going to be exempting them from paying any forms of school fees, which we know was in the spirit of what was intended when they were first brought home from Cuba. We also have another issue that has been a vexing one for some time, and that is to do with Caymanians who have stepchildren who come to Cayman and make Cayman their home. A number of them get caught up in an adoption process that takes a lot of years. And again, those families become very disadvantaged. These children, for all intents and purposes, are on their way to becoming Caymanians, and they are a part of a Caymanian family. And so they too would be exempt. Any of them who are in the process of adoption would be exempted from school fees going forward. The last key policy surrounds the whole issue of Cuban nationals with close Caymanian connections who are medical practitioners in Cuba. I think a lot of us will know a number of those individuals in the community, and at present there are a number of them that have to go to Jamaica to actually sit exams to be able to be recognized as medical practitioners in Cayman. And so the new policy will allow them to have access to a grant to assist with the cost of that program. I think we believe as government it's only right for persons with close Caymanian connections to be availed this opportunity. But more importantly, these are highly qualified and specialized individuals in many cases. And so we need to embrace as many of them who have close Caymanian connections in terms of how quickly and efficiently we can get them fully qualified and to be registered with the health ministry and be able to more positively contribute to our community and our economy. And so those were the three matters as it relates to our ministry. I think Minister Scotland had a number of matters he wanted to cover.
Thank you, Deputy Premier, and welcome to the press here today for the press briefing. Certainly not on a Thursday, but glad to see members of the press corps. And I have a couple of matters relating to my ministry specifically. First of all, a very positive one following on from the announcement this morning of the anti-crime trust by the Minister of Education, and certainly applaud the ministry and the various ministries who were involved in that program. Looking forward to see it being implemented. Certainly from my ministry, we want to be very proud today to launch formally the National Sport Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2013-2018. And just to say briefly, when a common vision is shared, we can achieve it together with greater ease and efficiency. It is on this premise that we set out to develop a national sports policy and strategic plan for the Cayman Islands. For many years, the Cayman Islands have continued to achieve in sport beyond what anyone would expect from a nation of our size. To our credit, and to the credit of the athletes that have trained, traveled, and competed for our nation, we have received a Commonwealth gold medal, we all know, Sudan and Mothersill, and several Pan Am Games medals, and Athletics World Championships medal, and numerous CRIFTA Games medals in track and field and swimming. We have hosted track meets with world-class athletes, as we witnessed just last week with the Cayman Invitational, attracting the caliber of athletes such as the world's fastest man, Usain Bolt, and one of the world's fastest women, Carmelita Jeter. We've also hosted the CRIFTA Games twice, the Women's World Squash Open several times, the Norseca Volleyball Championship several times as well, and the impressive list of competitions and events held here goes on. To build on these successes, we need to have a shared vision, a vision that all stakeholders within the realm of sports can support, work together, and build on to achieve our aspirations together. In June 2012, I established the Strategic Sports Advisor Group, a group empowered to play a significant role in the process of developing a common vision and a strategic plan to achieve that vision. This group was made up of representatives from across the sporting sector and had as its first goal to develop an appropriate vision for sports in the Cayman Islands to which government, sports associations, and other stakeholders should subscribe. The process to develop this document involved a 2-day stakeholders workshop consisting of a wide group of sports stakeholders, from the islands. During that workshop, they set about the task of developing an appropriate vision, a number of broad overarching strategic goals, and several objectives for each goal. They also developed a number of values which will guide the implementation of the policy, and in the spirit of teamwork, the workshop included the research completed as part of the National Sports Conference back in 2006-2007 and utilized the information contained in that research to form a foundation for discussions. The physical, emotional, and psychological benefits of sports are well documented, and thus the vision that was developed is to improve the lives of all through sport. The strategic directions are: 1. Improve overall coordination and structure of sport. 2. Continually build and expand on capacity within national sports associations. 3. Establish and maintain appropriate sports and recreation facilities in all districts through multi-sectoral collaboration. 4. Improve the quality and increase the quantity of PE in schools through implementation of the PE curriculum in line with the long-term athlete development principles. 5. Increase the value placed on sport, recreation, and physical well-being. 6. Enhance the links and coordination among sport, education, and other wider agendas, particularly health. Establish a robust framework to promote talent development and high-performance sport, embracing the long-term athlete development principles. And 8. Establish a sport funding model which successfully capitalizes on multi-sectoral funding sources. These strategic goals are based on the long-term athlete development model, which is the model which is now globally subscribed to by advancing sport nations. It is a model which identifies specific development windows and makes the most of these opportunities during the human growth process to ensure appropriate coaching at all age levels. It starts with developing active children and advancing them to the stage of specialization within different sports. When properly administered, it is expected to result in greater numbers of higher level athletes, as well as a healthier, more active nation, which will help us to realize many health-related benefits. This document has truly been a collaborative effort on the part of many individuals representing multiple entities, which I believe is a significant contributing factor in ensuring its successful implementation. I want to take this opportunity to thank the members of the Strategic Sports Advisor Group and the other stakeholders that participated so enthusiastically and productively in this process. I also want to thank ministry staff, particularly the Chief Officer, Jennifer Ahern, and the Senior Policy Advisor for Sport, Mr. Joel Francis, for their hard work and commitment to moving this policy process to completion. I look forward to seeing everyone working together on this policy to achieve our vision of improving the lives of all through sport. And you all will receive copies of the policy now. I also want to address one other item that's been somewhat vexing over the past few days in a media blitz being carried out by a former member of the Sinoco board and current member of the Seafarers Association. In fact, he was on Radio Cayman on the Talk Today show just now. He's been a regular caller to other talk shows, and he's been spreading what are very inaccurate and erroneous comments regarding government's position and what has taken place over the past few years as far as the Seafarers Association. As we all know, some time back, over 10 years ago, under a previous government, seafarers, government policy was taken to provide seafarers who are members of the Seafarers Association and who meet the relevant criteria a ex gratia payment on a monthly basis that has been increased over the years slightly, and the amount is now, I believe, around $550 per month. Yes. Ex gratia benefit which they receive, and they also receive health care benefits from government for local health care and for overseas health care. And the only point in there to note is that the health care benefit includes 90% payment for overseas and a 10% co-pay. This morning, Mr. Gilbert McLean, who was the minister at that time that Sinoco was formed, confirmed that the 10% that the seafarers pay was to be in the form of a co-pay, because some of the seafarers were actually going overseas, and some of them were benefiting from Medicare and Medicaid in the U.S., so they wouldn't have to pay anything when they went overseas, and only the co-pay. So that benefit remains. This government in the past 4 years has done nothing to reduce that benefit or to eliminate the benefit. And so I just want to confirm that the 90% payment that is paid for healthcare overseas for seafarers is still in place. The benefit, as I said, also in terms of this ex gratia payment, also remains. There's been no change to that. I want to also correct a remark that was made by Mr. Douglas, the gentleman I'm referring to now, earlier as well. And I also made this point several weeks ago on another radio show, that the numbers of seafarers have in fact increased in the past 4 years. Somewhere to between 100 and 200 additional seafarers are now on the receiving that benefit from government, the ex gratia benefit, as well as the health care benefit from government. So while the perception might be that the numbers are decreasing, in fact, those receiving the benefit have increased, and to the tune, like I said, somewhere over 100, somewhere between 100 to 200 new recipients of that benefit are now on on government's books. So the cost to government has certainly increased over the years. The government that I'm a part of remains committed to seafarers receiving that benefit, and in fact are working very diligently to improve the benefit to the point that we recognize the difficulty that seafarers have when they do have to come up with a 10% payment, that many of them are not able to, and in fact many of them end up applying through the Ministry of Community Affairs, Department of Children and Family Services, to cover the 10% that they have to come up with. And so working very, very diligently with Synico, who are now in the process of upgrading and redefining the network that government uses for overseas healthcare, coming up with higher quality facilities, and working on reducing costs to government, we will be able to, coming from July onwards, we'll be able to now not only pay 90%, but pay 100% of the benefit that those seafarers receive in terms of healthcare overseas, simply because the cost is going to be lower. So paying 90% of $100,000, for instance, would have been $90,000, but now if you can get that same treatment for around $60,000 or $70,000, paying 100% of that is still a savings to government. So in fact, the benefit to seafarers will be increasing and getting better, and there's nothing being done to eliminate it or reduce the benefit. Just to say again that in talking to many of the seafarers, I know that they don't share the same views that this person does in terms of the campaign that he's been doing to smear government's, what government's policy is in terms of seafarers, and they have nothing to worry that the government is reducing their benefits, and those benefits remain. We acknowledge, as many know, what the seafarers contributed to the economy in years gone by. We also understand that it costs government a lot now to provide that benefit, but government is still committed to do so nevertheless.
Thank you very much, and it's important that these matters get aired, because I too heard some of the discussion, and I think I can quote the gentleman in saying that he wanted the public to know how this government was treating seafarers. And all I can say is that it would seem obvious to blind Bartimaeus that next Wednesday is a big day in Cayman, and there are people who are going to do whatever they can to make whoever they don't like look bad. And rather sad that it's personal and it's being used through the association. I don't think there's any government that has not supported the Seafarers Association and supported the Seafarers Association beyond measure in terms of when you look globally about what central governments have done for a category of people. An ex gratia system that no one has paid into, because I think a lot of people mix that up with a pension. It's not a pension. It's a direct payment from the coffers of this country's government to seafarers. That was started, as the minister said, more than a decade ago and continues to this day. And these health benefits are incredible health benefits. And I congratulate the minister for his and his team on the very hard work that they've put in to trying to ensure that this country continues to honor the commitments that have been made to that very important category of Caymanians. Minister Glidden.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. Also, just want to express my thanks to the press and those watching on CIG TV. I think last week I gave all updates from my ministry. We had some small pieces of legislation in terms of some planning amendments, some local vessel changes, but I assume there's some questions at question time, so I'll just wait till question time to answer, and just again express my appreciation for the press attending this conference.
Thank you, Minister Seymour.
I thank you, Deputy. Thank the press for being here today on this Tuesday. Quite a change, but nevertheless, as Minister of Community Affairs, I must comment on some of the rhetoric that I've been hearing on the radio, and seems quite political in nature. And I'd just like to reiterate, as we've been saying for the past couple of weeks, as I took over as minister just a few months ago, just a few short months ago, the process in terms of sending out this communication to the seamen was already in motion. And it was something that I found there when I went to the ministry. And definitely, there's no effort or no move. I don't know what the previous minister, Trina, thought was, but I know that under my leadership as minister, there is no effort, and this has been discussed with the chief officer and all the other staff, administrative staff. There should be no effort to cut off any seaman or take any benefits away from anyone, at least during my tenure there as Minister of Community Affairs. So just want to make that clear, and that the only reason I understood after I got there and asked why the letters have been sent out, it's been explained that this has been done before, and definitely an effort to ensure that the persons who are in waiting lists, apparently there are some 60 or 70 persons that are on the waiting list because of budget constraint. They can only be added if someone is deceased. And this is an effort again to try to add more persons on who is deserving of this benefit. Most have heard our cabinet say that, we believe that every one of them are deserving, even the ones on the waiting list. But everyone knows these are austere times. No one likes to hear that, but that's the reality of things, and we need to live within the means that we've been given. So just wanted to mention also that the youth remand facility that had been talked about for a while, and it's now a constitutional responsibility of the Cayman Islands to ensure that it is completed by November 2013, still hasn't been resolved to move forward, and will have to be dealt with the new administration coming in, and wasn't able to get cabinet's approval to move this forward because of the very nature that we found the situation in when I took over the ministry, cost-wise and operational-wise. So just wanted to make note that possibly need to go back to the drawing board with this project, and to try to change the scope once again to a plan that suits Cayman. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Seymour. And I think last week there was a question posed in regards to returning to the United Democratic Party. And I would love to just take this opportunity and preempt Ms. Ledger's question to say that anyone who has heard anything that I've said on the public platform, it's been carried live by Radio Cayman, should have zero doubt as to whether or not I would return to UDP or form a government with them. The answer is no. 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 Any questions?
Mr. Franklin, how are you, sir? Quick question with regards to your first topic with the policy for the Cuban Caymanians.
Caymanians.
How many students does it affect? How many people are out there? How many? Do you have any firm numbers?
We don't have firm numbers at this present time, Jay. What I can say is that the review that was carried out in the ministry, it was estimated that this would, on an annual basis, be less than $10,000 in fees. So it would have an immaterial impact on the government budget, but obviously it would have a material impact on those individual households.
So it wouldn't increase the number of students going to school by an astronomical figure.
No, and let me be clear, Jay. The vast majority of these children are already in public schools. It's just that because they don't have Caymanian status, they were being charged a fee. And so the cabinet took the view that those two categories of persons should not be caught up and should therefore be offered this opportunity. The process will be quite simple. We'll have a form for them, for their families to fill out. The bottom section of the form, they'll simply return to the Minister of Finance, because under the education law, it's only the Minister of Finance that can actually waive fees. But as we've said, once all the due diligence is done and they fall within the category, the commitment is there that it would be basically a procedural matter at that time.
And with regards to allowing some of the Cuban doctors to go get a stipend or a grant per se to get fees to go to Jamaica and take the tests, that's what it is. So basically, it's like a hotel and airfare type deal.
The estimated cost is quite minimal from what I can understand. It's somewhere around $3,000 is what the people in the ministry are telling me. And as you can, and Jay, let's put it this way. I don't think there would be many countries that would balk at paying $3,000 to get access to a highly qualified doctor.
Okay, but then of course the only qualified so far outspoken Cuban doctor that I've seen in the news recently is Mr. Larraca, and would that apply to him?
I don't know his immigration status, so I don't know
Okay.
if he has close Caymanian connections.
I understand.
But what I can say is, and the Minister of Health can give us more information, there are already a number who have gone this route and are practicing right now at the HSA and making a positive contribution to the health services of the country.
So this is the policy that you're announcing today. You've already been doing it then?
No. This is
sorry.
We in moving around, certainly our community, this is something that has come up a number of times over the last month or so, and so it when I discussed it with my colleagues, it was one of those that had sort of gone under the radar, as it were, and once we had a time to consider it, we took the decision that as a policy, we ought to make this available to those persons.
So maybe there's another 15 or 20 of them out there type of thing.
There are other persons, Jay, obviously, the Cuban doctors being trained. We have a number of Cuban doctors practicing in Cayman already who've gone, not necessarily those that have the immigration qualify under the immigration criteria that Ms. Agnew spoke about, but this allows those with Caymanian ties to be able to have access to, as he said, a grant, so they can go and complete that part of the qualification process to be registered as a doctor here. So most of them would have had the professional and academic qualifications from Cuba, would have practiced there for some time, and under our registration process, we only recognize 7 different countries for registration presently. Jamaica is the closest jurisdiction to do that, and obviously what is preventing them is access to the funding. And if we can have access, as he said, to a good qualified doctor who speaks English well as a second language as well, and the only issue outstanding or preventing them is access to funding, then this program is very well welcomed.
Gentlemen, Wendy from CNS. Obviously, my question is regarding the documents that were released on Friday and the DART deal and the value for money report, the Third Amendment, the Second Amendments, and all of the various things that came with it. Obviously, it's been a lot of reading for the general public to take on board. There have been some obvious things highlighted already, such as the fact that the now that we're back to the Second Amendment, as the Third Amendment hasn't been accepted, it does appear that PricewaterhouseCoopers had some serious concerns about the 50% tax rebate, the other duty concessions, and they didn't, when they talked about value for money, I mean, reading between the lines, I don't think they necessarily did find value for money. I think they might have said, well, if you add this column and that column, then there is, the Cayman government could recoup the money, but they point to many risks. So how do you feel about that situation now that it's that deal is back at the Second Amendment? You were involved, Mr. Scotland, you were involved in negotiations, and you were in the government. All of you were in the government, despite the fact that I know Mr. Glidden says that he wasn't involved in the negotiations. You all were around when that was signed without these, without getting these extra things that you've got now, which might have made the agreement more value for money. I think people have a lot of concerns about it. What do you say to the people of the Cayman Islands, but now we're left with this agreement that doesn't look that great for us?
When I'll just jump in. Obviously, having gotten involved from a ministerial point since December, we've explained, we've discussed, we've talked about the need. There was a lot of assumptions being made that the reason why we were negotiating was because it wasn't value for money. My colleagues who were involved at that stage said it was value for money. We felt as representatives, and I felt quite comfortable in saying yes, while it might have given an independent review could come out saying it was value for money. I had concerns about the deal as well, and we were pushing for a Third Amendment. So we've gotten to the stage just recently where the other party has now withdrawn from negotiating for the Third Amendment and have gone back to the Second Amendment. I think it's been quite clear. The position is, so far the action that the government has taken is that we were willing to close a small section of West Bay Road. I think it's common knowledge that the biggest component of that, the NRA agreement, was the closing of the road. We felt it was safe to close the portion by the hotel and the piece by the public beach for closing the road while we were negotiating the Third Amendment. The fact that the Third Amendment has not passed means that the road has not been gazetted, it has not been closed. And obviously that's not going to happen between now and the 22nd. So the new government after the 22nd will have to negotiate. They will have to decide whether they think that there is justification, that they have a mandate to go forward and to continue with that, or to go back and renegotiate the agreement as we were doing to try to get, like you just said, more value for money. And that's the position where we're at, and that's where we feel comfortable saying we need to end up negotiating and working on a better deal for the country.
When I just want to add again that the first iteration or the first signing of the NRA agreement, even with the value for money, the draft that came out at that point said it was value for money. Obviously, it identified some concerns, and I believe that notwithstanding those concerns, PwC would still say it was value for money. The obviously look at the where there was some discrepancy in terms of the financial cost to government versus the financial cost to DRCL. But when you look at the bigger picture in terms of what the NRA agreement stands for the country in terms of the short, medium, and long-term growth and development, sustained growth and development, which is what we were trying to incentivize with the NRA agreement. Because again, we have to put the whole thing in context and remember that we continue to talk about a very, very slow growing economy, if any growth at all, and ways to continue to diversify and encourage that growth. And everyone talks about whether it's a good deal or if it's not a good deal, but the other question is, and that's a very important question when we talk about the NRA agreement and indeed the Four Cayman Investment Alliance, what are government's other options to do it? So that's a big factor when we talk about value for money as well. So we look at value for money in the context that did we have very many other options to create that type of growth and sustain growth? we will have many jobs going into the future. And so while others can say, it wasn't a good deal for the country and it's not a good deal and so on, I still think that, and certainly the report showed that from the very first signing of the agreement, it presented value for money. Yes, there were concerns, and some of those concerns have been addressed, but the NRA agreement presents value for money for the Cayman Islands, both in the First, Second, and Third Amendment. Obviously, we're back at the Second Amendment now, and to Wendy's point, the question about whether or not, what have we left there now, and if it's not that good a deal, I think the Second Amendment still presents a good deal for the Cayman Islands. And so while we as Mr. Clinton said, in a couple of weeks, the incoming government can pick up those negotiations and continue to address some of the concerns and so on and achieve a better deal. Even if we have to implement the Second Amendment and continue on, the country still is going to end up with a good arrangement.
Sure. And just to also say, Wendy, that the description you made about in regards to adding up what the PwC report is doing is being thorough and ensuring that when you do a value for money analysis, that you are accounting for all of the factors, including growth potential in the economy, etc., before you can say what's a value proposition. The two other factors that need to be reiterated is that in May 2013, these negotiations started from early 2010 with the DART Development Agreement. And because that was the first iteration, it was a DART Development Agreement, and then it morphed into something bigger called the Cayman Investment Alliance, which was a large and complex development agreement. And so we decided to pull a piece of it out. Anytime you pull a piece of something that is much bigger out, and you're not easily able to match up all of the benefits with any particular aspect of it, then it really does cause for there to be a much more difficult exercise in terms of assessing what the value proposition is. The reality is the value proposition was the DART Development Agreement, which became the FCIA. That was the value proposition, and all of the development that was going to go with that, which was a 15 to 30 year build out of in excess, I think, of $2 billion worth of stated development. I don't think that there's many countries in this world that, if you look at our GDP and you compared what impact that agreement would have had on our GDP, they wouldn't have wanted to have that sort of certainty going into the future in terms of development. I think the reality is we need more developers coming to the table for government to negotiate with. I think one of the real concerns that people have, and it's a concern that every member of this table has as well, is that you don't want there to be too many eggs, quote unquote, in one basket, in terms of the success or otherwise of our economy. And that is something that we as government need to continue to do after May 22nd and ensure that people understand the Cayman Islands is open for business, but it has to be done in a clear, transparent manner, and has to be a value proposition for Cayman.
Mr. Glidden, you mentioned with regards to the second agreement and closing of a small portion of West Bay Road, and I'm probably going to steal Wendy's question here as well. But currently, even with the Second Amendment, the government is not in compliance with the National Roads Authority agreement with regards to leaving the second portion of the road open. You have not gazetted the closure, so therefore you're in non-compliance with the agreement. And you're just going to leave it for the next government, I take it.
Well, we feel that compliance is a continuation of negotiating. If we look at compliance, we will look and say that if you're familiar with the agreement, it also calls for the reconstruction of the hotel. All right? So we can look and say that they're not in compliance either, unless you consider what's been done so far as the start or the reconstruction of the hotel. So I think it's a work in progress. Us not being in compliance, if the argument is not compliant, it was that we haven't been compliant since sometime in May. If the negotiations are still going on, it's going to be compliance at a time when the negotiations are completed. All right, and we still think that there's much to negotiate. If we're not willing to accept the conditions in the Second Amendment because we're working toward the Third Amendment, then your question could very well be, well, what happens if you're not able to reach agreement? And I think if you're familiar with agreement, you will see that there are remedies for that. There are remedies for for either party breaching the agreement, and then you'll have to deal at that point with those remedies.
So knowing that the deal is worth, and let's go back to the question we had for you last Thursday, and knowing how much the value of the agreement is, and it's over $700 million, probably more than that when you look at everything else. It could be up to billions when you look at how many hotels that the DRCL is supposed to be contributing to the country in the long term. Is $16 million a large number or a small number to be that far apart on and that close to a finish line and not get the third agreement done before your term is up?
Well, Jay, it's important when you refer to the size of the agreement. I think you got to refer to the potential side. There's no commitments except for the existing hotel. So it's fine to talk about it being $700 million or $1 billion. And if you were to give the appearance that getting that $700 million or $1 billion is totally dependent on agreement. But I think that you would appreciate that someone has bought land and they're sitting on the land and they're expecting to develop that land. And I don't think that you would want to suggest that in the absence of an agreement that the land is going to sit there for time immemorial and not be developed. Just like with the agreement, we don't know when we've saw a commitment that was made, signed the agreement, and we're going to get started on the hotel. The hotel has been torn down. There's been changes. There's been reiterations. We haven't seen that. Like my colleague said, when it started in 2010, the expectation was that we were going to get a significant stimulus. The country needed that. We were going to get employment from a construction standpoint. And for whatever reason, that hasn't occurred. So to talk about whether it's $700 million or $1 billion, let's put it in context and say that the concern when you ask about $16 million, if we're already talking about $16 million in concessions and we're talking about an additional 16, we would now be at $32 million in concessions for a hotel, which is expected to be somewhere in the vicinity of $150 to $170 million in costs. That's greater than a 20% concession, not including actually closing the road. And so the country has to ask itself, if we're going to have to start giving $50 million, let's say, or more in concessions for someone to build a hotel on our world-famous 7 Mile Beach, right? Then the precedent that sets is a significant one, because there are other developers who come along and they want to build a hotel in East End or in Beach Bay, right? What is it that you're going to have to give in terms of a concession to make that work?
Right, but
and so it's not $16 million in terms of a $700 million deal. It's 16 million plus the other 16 in concessions, which are 32. So we're saying, should the country set a precedent of giving $50 million in concessions to incentivize a developer to build a $150 million hotel? So what level of concession should the country give at that point? And it sets a precedent. And so it's not 16 million, like I said, in terms of $1 billion, because I think that answer would be easy. But if it's $16 million in terms of $100 million of economic investment, then it gets a harder answer for you to say.
And Jay, just a quick question, just a quick point there to add. I think we're focusing a lot on what you asked last week, which is it's $16 million too much to kill the deal, so to speak, in terms of that concession. And I think we should also remember that we're not just talking about the value of the concession, but also how it was structured. That was a big factor in the discussions breaking down as well. Not entirely the value of it, but the way the concession was structured.
Agreed wholeheartedly, but the third amendment took care of that structuring.
No.
It did address it slightly with the restructuring of some of the concessions for the hotel.
Right, but not that specific one you're referring to.
I thought it. Well, I'll have to read back again. It was a lot of documents that you sent out at 6 o'clock on a Friday night.
Right. So you actually read all of them?
It's not really comparing it because the government's also getting a ton more with the third agreement with regards to the adult training center, the widening of the Esterly-Tibbetts Highway, which could be up to $30 million worth of construction costs, things like that. I mean, you would be getting a lot more with the third amendment than just one hotel.
Of course, but let's have again, because it's interesting now that we're having the discussion, because there was a period of time where people were saying that, oh well, it must have not been value for money, and government was trying to claw it back. now you're getting a saying, oh well, that was a good deal that government was doing for the Third Amendment, and we should go forward. But let's just explain the widening. Let's just explain the widening of the Esterly-Tibbetts. All right, there is a challenge, And government went into this and we said, okay, let's look at the concession package and let's see if we can get something as important for the infrastructure as widening the Esther Tibbetts. And we all supported that. And that was a cost of $11 million. And we added that onto the concession package. And we said, the country is going to get this infrastructure. We're going to put it into a concession package. If you look at the third agreement, that concession package works out to $53 million. And to get the $53 million in concessions, the entity now has to come and invest more money. So at the front of it, it looks good. What you ended up missing was that there is a little calculation in there that refers to net present value calculation. And the net present value factor that was used when the agreement was signed was 10.5% per annum. So on $53 million, what we're getting is we're getting that concession amount increasing by $5.3 million per annum. And so you could end up with a concession package that unless you're using up $5.3 million per annum, instead of the concession decreasing, you could actually get that increasing. Or what you could get is you could get investors sitting on that for a 7-year period, and that actually $53 million now goes to $100 million. So you could actually have an incentive to not invest, but to sit and just have an accrual of your concession. And for those reasons, the answer to your question is, it's going to be a subjective one, like I told you last week, as to whether it's a good deal or not. But as responsible representatives, we have a responsibility to look and say, is this the best deal? So while the third agreement refers to $16 million, all right? And when we take just that concession package you talked about, we take the collective amount of those concessions, like the Esther Tibbetts, that was something good. And we now put that in a package and look at how fast that concession is going to grow. We could end up with a situation where instead of getting a reducing amount every year, we could get an increasing amount of concessions every year, and that could last for a very long time. And so we feel that the third amendment that you've seen, and I saw Wendy shaking her head when we talked about whether the third one is a good deal or not, we feel that, and we know that we're not going to get agreement on this, we think that we were right in trying to amend based on all the concerns that were there, even though it was, and we answered, and hopefully the report has shown you that what we were saying wasn't some fallacy. The reason why we weren't releasing the second amendment is because, yes, it did produce and say it was value for money, but there were challenges there that justified us looking for trying to reach a third amendment. And that's what we did. We spent some 6 months doing that. And we tried explaining that. We know the press didn't like to hear that, and they kept asking when it was, and we got into these imminent discussions, all right? But now that it's been released, you've seen, yes, it was value for money. Is it the best deal for the Cayman Islands? That's a decision that people will disagree on. We felt that it was a good deal, but we could improve it, and we had a responsibility to continue to try to improve that, and that's what we were working towards, and we feel justified in that. And you will remember me saying that I feel once the documents are released, that the public will see why we were working on trying to get a better agreement, not because it wasn't value for money in the beginning, but because we shouldn't just be satisfied because it said value for money.
Sorry, just to get some more out of you, because I think the thing is that some people have described the agreement as a train wreck. Sure. And I think the point that I'm trying to make is that you were all in office at the time that the first agreement was signed, that the NRA was signed. I know you were on a backbench, both Mr. Seymour and yourself were on the backbench, but you were still part of the UDP government that signed that agreement. That I think everybody can see. You may say, well, we think it was value for money. I think a lot of people will read the PwC report, will read the DART deal for themselves and see that perhaps because DART wasn't pinned down in many areas, I mean, PwC have raised that issue about DART wasn't pinned down, not even to the new road in Barker's, not to other developments, and also there wasn't anything to prevent DART from using the concessions in the existing Himana Bay, which all of those things are brought up by PwC. There's a lot. It isn't, and it's too much to go into right now. My point is, I think a lot of people will question whether it was value for money, and they will question whether that first deal stroke second amendment is a good deal for the country. And you were all there at the time. My question is, do you have any regrets about that deal being signed? Because clearly you were trying to, whether you say it isn't that or not, you were trying to pull things back with that third amendment and improve the deal, whether you say it's about value for money. You were trying to improve the deal. Do you regret the signing of the agreement in the first place?
Wendy, is that, how many questions is that?
You know what, the last one will just do. Do you? I'll concede that went on for too long. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I know it's a long day.
Wendy, I don't regret being part of the government that negotiated and signed the NRA agreement. As Ms. Anglin, who left, said earlier on, government was a proposal was made to government to enter an agreement with DART. It was at that time called a DART agreement. It turned into the Cayman Investment Alliance, and then from there the NRA agreement. And like I said, it was almost 3 years of discussions that were ongoing to arrive at where we are now. For the reasons that we signed the agreement, like I said earlier, when we look at the condition of the economy, which is not getting very much better as we speak, we're doing our best and things are starting to improve slightly. But when we have a proven developer, as we said earlier on, yes, there are concerns about the size of the developer and so on. But what can't be refuted is the quality of the developments they've done so far, and the amount that's been invested in our economy, to the tune of over $1 billion in the past 15 years. So a proven developer presents himself to the government with a proposal to continue to develop and to enter an arrangement that where government benefits and to receive some concessions which will incentivize them to continue to grow and their own, obviously their developments and so on. I have no regrets in having signed that. We felt it was value for money from the very beginning. Certainly, as I said earlier, the PwC report, the very first draft, said it was value for money. Obviously, as Mr. Glidden said as well, people are going to have their own opinion. We did what we said we were going to do, which was to have an independent entity review the agreement and give us their professional opinion, which an independent entity selected from other professionals on island, and they carried out the review, and their review has said that it was value for money. Yes, there were concerns, but again, like I said, notwithstanding those concerns, it still presents value for money. Yes, the discussions that were ongoing from the time we did the first review were about improving the arrangement, so that, because like I said earlier on, and I didn't mention, we hadn't mentioned yet today again, but some of those things we were trying to bring into the second and third amendment were obviously areas of the agreement that would have been in the main agreement, but that, as we know, discussions of that broke down last year after other issues with the waste management facility and otherwise. And so we were trying to improve the arrangement, knowing that this was going to be we weren't going to get to those matters addressed in the main agreement at this time. And so again, when you look at the things that were in there, the extension of the widening activities, as you said, the new public beach, Smith Cove, getting Smith Cove Beach, getting the public beach at Barkers, we think those are huge benefits for the Cayman Islands going to the future, as well as you said, 700 plus million from one hotel, the possibility of $2 billion when you see the development plan that they presented. Yes, there may be some concerns about what their commitment was and the timing of those things, but nevertheless, based on how the incentives were structured, they were incentivized to do the hotel right away, and that's what we were trying to ensure. There were some concerns there that had not started yet, and so we were trying to ensure that was incentivized to start as quickly as possible, because that was the one commitment they made to develop right away. But again, to answer the question of any regrets about it, I don't have a regret about signing the NRA agreement, or indeed negotiating towards the Cayman Investment Alliance, because as I said again, that was one of the things that we committed to as a government in terms of trying to restart the economy.
Just to clarify, it's that issue of the signing. Clearly, you have been very critical of your predecessor, the previous UDP government, and the Premier for signing the agreement with Czech. You all signed this agreement and then wanted to negotiate. That's the point I'm trying to make. I mean, no one thinks that was perhaps not a great idea to sign that deal before and then start negotiations? No,
because when we signed the agreement, when there was a specific clause in the agreement which allowed for review and revision to the agreement after the independent review was concluded. So we made specific provision there, because again, there was people who said, why did we sign the agreement before we did the review? And I've always said we had to come to a position, a definite position on what the agreement looked like, and review that, and then we revise it. And that's what was included in the NRA agreement, was a specific provision for review and revision to the agreement. So there was what was called a review period.
But when in answer to your question, because you're asking pretty direct, I think it's safe to assume that 9 people in the room, that there would be some people who didn't agree on signing the agreement when it was signed, right? However, what I'm saying is that based on my position and where I found myself, while we have a signed agreement, I still have a responsibility to, even taking on the fact that it was a signed agreement, that we should have, and we continue to negotiate to try to improve on that agreement, based on the findings and the discussions that were had. So, that's, hopefully that answers your question. I mean.
Actually, I've got a question for Mr. Seymour. Minister Seymour, can you be a bit more specific about what's happened regarding the remand centre? You've talked about, obviously we know about cost, but it was factored into the budget, and what are the operational problems that you've talked about? And when you say going back to the drawing board, are you talking about scrapping the Missouri model, or what? Can you be a bit more specific about what's happened?
Well, it wasn't factored in the budget. And I think there was only $8 million factored in to the budget, thereabout. And there were some quotes up to 11.8 million, I do think. And the operational costs, there was going to be a considerable amount of staff that would have had to been hired. Even the governor had concerns about this. In fact, he was most concerned about the operational and recurrent costs. And definitely, even though the project was slated as a Missouri model project, there were aspects of the actual building or the project in itself that were not Missouri, part of the Missouri model. So there was a mixture.
So when you say going back to the drawing board, scrapping Missouri then? Thanks.
Well, if the Missouri is what's driving the costs so high, then it would have to be scrapped and try a Cayman model. I mean, as a minority government, for us to move ahead and commit the country to $10-11 million for another building that's going to house some 10-15 children, which are so precious to us, then the cabinet thought that this should be dealt with the whole House approval, all elected members, not only just the minority government's approval.
No, have you got more? Sorry. I have one more question, but it's for Minister Anglin. He's left.
He apologized. He had a dental.
Oh yeah. Actually, the final question that I have really is, as the election is approaching. Last week we did talk about the situation that you find yourselves in, being just 5, and that there obviously that you will have to be involved in alliances. As we get closer, do you foresee greater direct talks with other groups and specific arrangements for how you could form a government? Have you got any more details on that?
I can tell you, Wendy, that there's an old saying, they got to get across the river first.
That's it.
And that's what we're working on right now. And the water's very rough. That's all I can say right now. So I'm trying my best, and I'm sure my other colleagues can say the same thing. We're trying to get elected on May the 22nd. And immediately after 18 people are elected, I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussions started. But as far as a group, I can say that we haven't had any discussions with any individuals or groups recently about forming a government. I know that I think we're, as I said all trying to get elected in our respective districts, and then see how we can get the 5 of us then involved in forming a government.
Just step back to the NRA agreement, if I may, and the different amendments. Going forward, because of the first, second, and now third, and the no third amendment, do you feel that the government might have issues with future public-private sector partnerships because the government keeps going back for an amending and changing and asking for more with this particular agreement?
Jay, make no mistake, the discussions that were in terms of the for the second and third amendment were not just government asking for more. It was both parties continuing negotiations. So I don't think there'd be any issues with any other developers. There's other discussions going on with developers now about development agreements, and so and there have been in the past as well. So I don't see why there would be any issues, because, like I said, this wasn't a one-way discussion, as the government alone seeking more out of the agreement as well.
And Jay, I mean, we just want to say, like my colleague said, we have ongoing discussions now. We have actually three projects on the way where there's some form of development agreements, and we have one that has moved quite well, which is the Shetty Hospital, that we were able to negotiate significant concessions in a package successfully that gave them a level of comfort for them to move forward and go. So in no way do we take this as an issue with the Cayman Islands government, and the interest and confidence is there, and it's a matter of negotiating. It depends on, sometimes you're able to reach agreements that work, and sometimes you're not. But again, the important thing was that we were there, we were putting it out. I think since the agreements have been released, I personally haven't found one person who's come to me and said, oh yeah, you should have signed it, you should have gone ahead. All the people that have come to me haven't seen the agreements, feel that we were justified in trying to improve on the deal. There has been those questions as to, well, why did you sign it? And again, we signed it, we wanted things to move, and we were moving forward, and we had the option to continue to negotiate, and that's what we were doing. But again, the government has that responsibility to ensure. And we have made steps. We have created, for example, the partner has built a road, and the government has closed the road. By closing that road, it's increased a certain amount of value, so they've gotten that value. By getting the new road, we've been able to get significant benefits for our people. And we look forward to being able to reach an agreement that allows both parties to feel satisfied that between the Cayman Islands government representing the country and for the developer to reach an agreement. And hopefully we'll get there. I don't think we're there yet. And as such, as a group, we didn't feel that, it's now back to saying, well, let's accept the Second Amendment. Well, the reason why we were negotiating the Third Amendment was because we didn't feel that the Second Amendment was addressed all the issues, all the concerns we had. So to go back to the Second Amendment now would be a bit, I guess, difficult.
That's where you're at.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that like I said,
I know it's where you're at now, and the next government has to continue on with the Third Amendment negotiations.
and you're also you're where you're at, but there are things in there that you have to decide whether you're. See, if we just look at it a broad picture, you're at one point that says let's scrap everything and let's battle it out, and you're at another point of saying let's agree on it and move forward, and somewhere in the middle you're going to be negotiating at that point. So saying you're at, the question is, really where are you? Where are you at? And that's why negotiations, we expect them to continue on, and we expect them to continue on with the new government.
And I don't really want to belabor the point, but if say DRCL says, no, I'm done negotiating, we're just going to stick with the second agreement and that's it, then that's signed, it's a done deal, you have to honor your end of it.
Or what?
Or you go to the clauses that, or
Exactly.
you renege, yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So there are those options. The DRCL will have to decide whether that option is best for them in the event that occurred, and the government would have to decide whether it's better. So where we were at is we were moving away from that, where we were getting to an agreement that we felt comfortable honoring without going to that point. We weren't able to get there, so we're back to the second one, which obviously we're not willing to go forward with. So then you look at your options from there. You continue to negotiate. An interesting thing is, as you would have seen, the agreement did have a lot of achievements in it, the Third Amendment, that as per their agreement, as for DRCL's statement, which said they agreed to that. All right, so we've improved on the deal even with their agreement to a certain point, but there's an outstanding issue. All right, and now the question is, does the government of the day decide whether that outstanding issue is one that they will compromise, or whether they think that that's fundamental enough that the deal should stop? And DRCL is in the same position. DRCL says they want to go back to number 2. All right, but again, it's going to end up to the two parties deciding actually where they want to go.
Jay, I heard what you say in terms of talking about, other private-public partnerships in terms of the government. We must be reminded of the reason why we had to move to this route and start negotiating in these manners. I hope that the country never finds itself in that situation again. The debt, the liabilities that this country now has, can't borrow for the next 3 years, etc. So hopefully, as you were saying, some will be scared to negotiate with the government again. I hope that we don't have to, and that the direction that we're moving in now, that we continue moving in this positive direction, so that the country will never have to negotiate in this manner again.
Just one final question, I guess, is what is the biggest lesson learned from these negotiations then? What are you taking away as the elections are less than a week away or about a week away? What's your biggest lesson that you're going to take away from these negotiations, or best advice for the new government taking over?
Well, you need to spend wisely. You need to afford projects you can. I've been saying for years now, the government's approach in terms of how we handle grandiose projects has always been, I have a dream, cost this dream for me. And rather, I think it should be reversed and saying, I have $100. Tell me what I can build for $100.
So my biggest lesson is that obviously for a government coming in on the real austere times with real challenges with finances, we will see that when you find yourself in that position, it's not the preferential position that you would want to be in. The previous administration was able to go out and borrow money for this building. They were able to get a project done. They were able to go out and borrow money for the school. When you're in a situation where you're having to sit and negotiate with other parties to fund major infrastructure costs and stimulus measures that the country will need, you're going to find yourself in a weakened position. However, the message to the new administration is that you also always have that responsibility to negotiate in the best interest of the people who you're blessed to represent. And however difficult and long those negotiations are, the importance is going to be that you need to continue to do what you feel is right for their best interests. And that's what I'm committed to do.
And Jid, the only thing I'd add to that is that the lesson to learn, I think we all need to learn, is that the challenging times that we continue to be in as a country, the Cayman Islands, has very unique characteristics, both financially, the things that attract developers and investors and people that want to come and live here and work here. But when we look past those, there's many other jurisdictions nowadays where people go and develop, where people do business, do the offshore financial business, where are now there are other jurisdictions that are more popular in terms of tourism destinations. We can't deny those facts. And so when we look at everything that we're doing nowadays, even with the Dr. Shetty project that my colleague spoke about a while ago, it's the one word that everyone needs to think about is competition. Cayman Islands is no longer the only choice destination for the various activities that are happening here, whether it's tourism, financial services, growth and development. And so we're in a global world now when it comes to all of those various activities, and so we have to be very, very competitive. And that's what we learned from this negotiation. That's what we learned from the negotiation with the Dr. Shetty agreement that we entered in several years ago. And as my colleague said, that development is going very, very well. And so when we consider that, as I said, we're competing with other jurisdictions for the same thing nowadays, And so when we can accept that fact, I think we'll enter all those negotiations with a much better frame of mind and understanding some of the things that need to be done to ensure the growth and development that we have here in the country. And as my other colleagues said, we hope we wouldn't find ourselves in a situation, because we should be in a position where the country has reserves and we can fund projects on our own. And at this point, we know that it's very difficult to do that because of the loan borrowings that we have now and the cash position that the country is in. And so we have to continue to be innovative in the way in order to get not only infrastructure projects, but as we said, innovative in the way that we can continue to encourage growth and development at this time.
Ministers, anything further?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Well then, I guess that concludes this coverage of this